This is Drew with Boomer Music Company, your band and orchestra experts since 1976. Well, greetings and thank you for watching our video where we're talking about supply chain disruption. This was a conversation on May 7th, 2022 that I was fortunate enough to have with Shane Deuel from the Eastman Company and Bob Newhouse from KHS. And they are representatives from international companies that do a lot of importing, exporting, manufacturing overseas, bringing together raw materials and assembling them and then taking them somewhere else. So both Shane and Bob have really become experts on what the current problems are and what the challenges are going forward with solving that. And we got to the end of the discussion, and Bob mentioned to me that we kind of were focusing on all the negatives, and I wanted to kind of redirect prior to the discussion here that not everything is negative. There are a lot of people that are working on solving these problems in really productive ways, and it's exciting to see that happen, but it's just going to take time. As you'll see in the discussion, a lot of the things that are going wrong now just don't have any easy fixes. The other thing that I also want to mention is, yes, the COVID era had lots of negatives. No one can deny that, but in my opinion, we're at least a decade ahead of where we would have been with leveraging these technologies for things like, video conferencing and just remote collaboration. And this is leading towards advancements in things like AI and virtual reality we're so much further ahead of it than where we would have been. I'm really excited to see where we're going with all of that kind of stuff. So if you really like this video, please like, share, subscribe, check out the channels. We've got lots of great content on there. And without further ado, here's the discussion between myself, Shane Deuel, and Bob Newhouse talking about supply chain disruption, where we're at, and where it's going. All right, so we're here at the Boomer Step Up Day, and this is a unique opportunity for me to get to see people in the industry and talk shop. And the thing on everyone's mind right now is the global supply chain disruption. And Shane and I were talking earlier, we've both read, and I know you're going to be very interested in reading it too, Bob. It's the book Arriving Today by Christopher Mims. And giving a brief synopsis of that, he started researching that at the end of 2019 and was investigating the global supply chain. And then you know what happened from there. So it turned into a very different book than the one that he intended to write.
He thought he had a paragraph and he ended up with a novel.
Yeah, exactly. But so throughout the course of that, he went through a theoretical USB charger and its journey from being manufactured to being delivered to your house, and exploring all the things along the way that have to happen and go right in that. And the reason I want to talk to you guys today is because you're both representatives from manufacturers who are dealing with this very issue. So I don't know what immediate thoughts either one of you have. Just jump right in with, what's going wrong, how's it going to get fixed, and I don't want to see how long is it going to take because no one knows that. But what are the specific challenges that you're seeing, and what do you think the causes of them are? Just let's let it be a free form conversation because I'm very curious.
To me, it'd be easier to go the opposite and say what's going right.
Okay.
As far as what's going wrong, it seems like everything.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're having the same issue, Shane. It's silly to me how every single step, getting the parts to make the product, has been delayed, and then getting them manufactured, getting them in trucks to get to the ports is taking long. It's literally every single step. I could go on. There's 50 other issues that are happening. I don't know if you guys are hearing the same thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's a lot of people who know a whole lot more about supply chain now than they ever wanted to, because it affects everybody's everyday life in pretty much all the products you use. There's so many things impacted by the supply chain. One thing I really started to think differently about is the fact that it's not a chain. If you think of a chain, you think of one link after another, and then it finally gets to the end. But I think of it as more like a supply web.
Yeah.
Like this three-dimensional web that's all interconnected, and it's really complex. It's not just one simple step after step after step when it comes to manufacturing something. I mean, you have multiple countries involved with the raw materials. And those raw materials then go to various factories to make parts. And then those parts go to maybe one factory to then assemble everything. And all it takes is one thing to go down. one thing to go wrong. Let's say, a raw material supplier of copper, for example. Maybe their mine is shut down because of COVID. And then all of a sudden, all of these various other things that rely on that part are delayed. And so you have all sorts of manufacturing issues. And I'm talking not just instrument manufacturing. I'm talking about any industry around the world.
Yeah.
You have, all it takes is one thing to go down of this web. And then all of a sudden you can't complete the finished product because of that one thing.
Well, yeah, and that was the thing with the supply chain as we know it, and we'll still use the word chain even though web is much more
Sure.
accurate,
Right.
Is that everything's been designed to be just in time. It's not just in case. Just in case is putting stuff in a warehouse and sitting on it for months and months at a time and delivering it at some later date. Just in time is like what Amazon does. You bring stuff into one side of the warehouse at noon and it's out the other side packaged ready to go by 2. I mean, nothing stays stationary. It's constantly in motion, and I think we just hit a world where motion stopped, and getting it started back up again is just such a cumbersome process.
Oh yeah, it's this massive machine that stopped quickly and it's very slow to start again.
Well, and then even what we're finding, even once it's started, there's still hiccups. I mean, COVID is still a thing.
Yeah.
So, the factories that we've got overseas are having shutdowns again and things like that. We have an issue with one of our factories where we can't get people to drive the trucks because of the I don't know what they call them, but counties or whatever. Everybody has to stay within their county. It's like a lockdown by village or whatever. And so the truck driver has to be from that area. So that limits the amount of truck drivers. And it's like with the web, like you were talking about, Shane, it's not just one piece. Every single piece of the web seems to be having issues, or the chain, whichever phrase that we're using. It's, like I said, it's a bit mind-boggling.
Well, and the other concept from the book, like the big concept is that predictability matters more than speed. And I know you're a sports fan, Bob. The analogy I use with that is baseball. You throw a 103 mile an hour fastball. If you can't hit the mitt, who cares?
Right.
And so it's the same thing with getting all the parts and the materials and stuff that if it arrives on Tuesday but you really expect it on Thursday, well that's mostly useless. Well, heck, you guys travel for a living. Have you ever been on a plane that landed early?
Rare.
Yeah. Do you get into the terminal any faster? No. You've got a very
Sit at the
specific
gate.
window
Yep.
where that plane can be at that gate, and if you're outside of it, then that actually gums up the system worse than if you were just on time. So that's definitely an interesting concept that I think we're all reconciling ourselves with, that you get the predictability has gone away completely. Because, I mean, time was when I'd ask either of you, be like, oh, I need to order this thing. When am I going to have it? You'd be like, a week. Now it's like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, every step is a question mark.
Yeah.
Like, how long is it going to take to get on the ship? And how long is it going to take to get into a port once it hits the United States? How long for the truck? Each one of those is a variable that we don't have the answers to.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it very difficult.
Yeah.
We brought up 2 categories here that I think it's important to understand. There's 2 different things going on. There's the actual making of the product. There's the manufacturing, and that can be disrupted because of one manufacturer has multiple suppliers of their own. And again, just one supplier going down, and that manufacturing of that product can be delayed. Then let's say you have a product that's completely done, it's all boxed up and it's ready to go. And once it's made through all the hurdles of potential delays there of the making of the product, then you have to transport it.
Yeah.
And that is a whole separate issue. At the transportation of a box going onto a container, that container at the factory then being driven to the port, then from being at that port, being loaded onto a container ship, and then the container ship going across the ocean, and then being unloaded at that port, and that container is now at the port waiting for a truck, and that truck has to pick up that container and then bring it to its maybe distribution warehouse or some sort of destination. And then that box has to be unloaded from that container, and that box then has to be sorted by someone in the warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
Then it has to go onto a freight truck, a semi-truck. And then that semi-truck has to take it to its hub, where it has multiple other semi-trucks going in various directions around the country. And then that has to go on its typically final truck to a store. The transportation, every step I just laid out there, each step has its own challenges.
And what you outline there also, because people say, well, then why don't we just make things in America? That doesn't solve the problem. Because even if you manufacture in America, first of all, where are the raw materials coming from?
All over the world.
Exactly. And then second, once it's assembled, because assembled in America is a thing, then you're entering into that same system where you need it to go through trucks and warehouses and boxes and all that kind of stuff. So that doesn't solve the problem.
Well, and to all those parts you're talking about, we haven't mentioned the fact that there's a worker shortage.
Yeah.
Every single step of those, nobody, I don't know about nobody, most of them don't have 100% of staff. So that is delaying things because there's just not as many people working as they need. And so it gets tricky. We had issues with our company in that we didn't have enough people to check stuff in, so we had to leave the containers basically in our parking lot. But then our parking lot got so full, we had to, in Huntsville, Alabama, we had to rent space to store containers until we could check them in. And just everything just kind of snowballs. Not to mention the fact that another problem we're having here in the States is, and it's been on the news a little bit, not about us specifically, but people are starting to rob or to steal from these containers. We had a container arrive from a train that the seal had been broke, and when we opened it up, there were 23 empty pallets in there. The product was just gone. And I think in my head that, if you're going to rob a train, you do it Jesse James style.
Right.
So I don't know how they got all these pallets onto the horses, but they did it.
Well,
oh man.
And the problem isn't anything that we anticipated. I mean, back when I used to work for a sheet music distributor, one small publisher got bought out by a larger one. I'm not going to name any of them by name, but they took their whole collection and moved it to the new warehouse. And 6 months later, they still weren't set up and ready to sell any of that stuff. And went back, and I talked to our rep. I said, "What's going on here?" And she's like, "Well, we've got, I think it might have been containers, like 60 of them, just full of stuff, and it's all unsorted, uncatalogued, and all that." And so I paused and I said, "If you had just burned it down and started over," she goes, "Oh, we'd be in a better place right now." I'm like, if arson is a preferable option to what you did, maybe what you did wasn't right. And that was an anticipated problem.
Right.
So, I mean, what hope do we have now for something that the ripple effect and the unintended consequences are just so severe and so immediate? I mean, I don't know what the answer is other than it's going to sort itself out eventually. I mean, obviously, automation has to play into it. But then you're into that weird paradox that you've got a shortage of workers, so the workers get paid more. So then automation is more cost effective, so then you need less workers. Where do you hit that balancing point?
I think there's a whole different podcast episode.
Right.
That's a big topic. But I think in our immediate challenges that we have, and I say we as manufacturers of anything, it's going to take probably at least another year.
Yeah, at least.
I mean, so we're talking then spring of 2023, potentially, where things could start flowing a little easier. But there's one thing I've learned about being in manufacturing is that there's so many things that can be thrown your way as a challenge. I mean, we had tariffs a few years ago.
Yep.
There was a port that exploded in China. I mean, how do you plan for that one? I mean,
Well,
there's just all sorts of
I wouldn't
potential
even have
challenges.
it on the bingo card, much less planned for it.
Right?
Oh,
right?
I had a train derailment once. This again when I worked for the sheet music distributor. I had a conductor ordered a score and it was late because of a train derailment. He called me up and yelled at me. I'm like, "You're yelling at me because a train derailed?" I'm like, "Sir, if I could derail trains, I wouldn't be working here.
That's
I could be doing a lot more lucrative things."
yeah. There's so many things just beyond your control.
Yeah.
Beyond your control. But yeah, I think we all as buyers of anything need to plan another year for things to just slowly sort themselves out, for production to increase and demand to level out. That's part of it. Is demand was so high across the country for stuff that comes in these containers, and as long as demand is this high, which is just record levels, we'll be dealing with delays. And COVID, like Bob said, is still a thing. It can shut down manufacturing unpredictably. You have no idea when that will be.
And with extreme demand, reduced supply, then you get inflation. I mean, the prices naturally have to go up for that because that inflation and pricing is nature's way of sorting this stuff out. I mean, It sucks, but it's just the reality of the situation. It's just where we're at.
Yeah, it's the highest in, 40 years right now?
Oh, at least.
Yeah.
And that doesn't seem to be getting better anytime soon either. So, I mean, I know you guys are in the awkward position of, things are more expensive. Prices increase. It's just, and we all have to stay ahead of that. It's the world we live in. It's just the reality.
Mm-hmm. It is. I think the best thing to do right now is plan farther ahead than you ever would.
Well, and that's, here as a, music store owner and renter of instruments specifically, I mean, that's a significant portion of what we do. I've had to completely rethink how I do it. I mean, because you both know that I'd been doing the typical just-in-time delivery. I'd place my orders early enough and then say, when's the latest that you can ship? Now I place the order and say, how soon can I get it? And it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's stuff that I need tomorrow, if it's stuff that I'm going to need in October. I want it now, and I want it in the building because you either get it or you don't.
Right. A bird in the hand is worth 10 in the container.
Yeah.
A very large percentage of my day is spent asking about ETAs.
Yeah.
The amount of phone calls I get on a daily basis, when are we getting this? And people, you're very nice, Drew, but people tend to get annoyed with my I don't know answer.
Well,
And
that's the thing. When I'm realistic. When I ask that question, I know that the answer probably legitimately is I don't know.
Right.
Although if I hear on the water one more time, I'm going to strangle somebody.
I'm going to have to figure out.
Yeah.
You figure out a better term for it than I think.
I use that one a lot.
It's a fluid situation.
It's on its way.
Yeah. But most of the reason I want to have this conversation, not so much to solve any problems, but just to, give anyone that happens to be watching or listening a behind the scenes of this is what we're dealing with. This is what we're trying to do. And the forward-facing part of that, a lot of people are seeing, but I don't know that they're internalizing really the depth and the scope of the problem. That there's just so many things that go into, so many little things. And like for instrument manufacturing, for example, something as silly as cases that come from a completely different manufacturer or a drop cover on a percussion instrument. It has to go together in that package. That's the way that whole thing is productized. But if that component is missing, then it's incomplete. And so then it's
waiting to ship until you get that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not like you can just say, okay, well, we'll just go with someone else to make that. The someone else doesn't exist because they were never necessary in the first place. And it was like the toilet paper shortage. By the time you retool and build new factories, and because that's a complex process, learned more about that than I ever wanted to, the crisis is over. And then you're tooled up for a crisis that no longer exists. So the efficiency of it is always going to come out.
Well, you mentioned cases. The thing about somebody wants a new case, and so companies that make instruments and cases, that's an interesting thing. Because containers are difficult to come by, that's the one thing we haven't really mentioned. There just aren't. Most of the containers are, on the water.
Don't strangle them.
Yeah, it's hard to find empty ones to fill up, right?
Yeah.
So people, I think, are reluctant to put basically empty space into that container, being a case. I'd rather have an instrument in that case.
Right.
So it's a little difficult sometimes to get just straight up cases.
Well, yeah, that is a very good point too. I'm glad we're talking about that people don't understand that these containers that we're talking about, it's a finite amount of cubic feet, meters, whatever your unit of measure is. So whatever you stuff inside of it, whether it's feather pillows or gold bricks, costs the same to move. Weight allowances aside, but the encumbrance, the bulk of it is identical no matter what. One container is one container. Or actually, one container is two 20-foot containers, but that's just dumb. So yeah, you want the high-value stuff to get priority in being shipped because that's what's going to return the money for the investment. And so you nailed it. Cases, yeah, some cases are expensive, but generally speaking, they take up just as much room as an instrument, and they sell for far, far less.
You're shipping air in a lot of cases.
Yeah. So why would you prioritize that? And then you're like, oh, well, let's just put an instrument in that case. Well, yeah, ideally, but now you don't have a case. So again, the answers to this stuff are not apparent. And how much has containers gone up? They were a couple $1,000s a couple of years ago, and now are they 10x now at this point? Ish.
I've heard people tell us crazy stories. People spending $30,000 on a container.
And at that point, why are you not just buying a plane?
Well, that's full too.
Yeah.
Well, there's another issue, right? Because you start shipping stuff in. Well, now you've got to get the customs at the airports, which aren't typically used to do. There's a lot of delays in when you're
Yep.
flying things in now. It's not as bad as the ships and the ports, but
Well,
that is slowed down too.
and your hubs aren't set up for it. If
Correct.
you fly a whole bunch of stuff into Nashville. Well, Nashville's a bad example because of FedEx, but if you're flying into a place that isn't logistically set up to handle that level of product instead of a port, which has trucks and rails and all that, then again, that it's unpredictable. You're acting in an unpredictable way, which is causing the problem. Predictable is go to where you're supposed to go when you're supposed to go there. So, I don't know. I don't know what the answers are. I just know that we're not in the same boat, but we're all in the same storm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As the saying goes.
Yeah. If anybody's looking for a quick, easy answer for this, or to pin it on one specific reason that everything is slow and backed up and delivering, much longer than usual, there isn't one. There's no simple answer.
Well, there's a simple reason. We're humans and we're interdependent on each other. We're social beings, and no person being an island. They always say that no one person could manufacture one pencil on their own. That you get the rubber from here, the graphite from there, the wood from there, and all that kind of stuff. And we're seeing that in spades, with much more complex things than that from much larger areas, and that's the problem.
Well, and I think Shane's mentioned a few times worldwide, and it truly is. I think a lot of times when we're talking containers in these day and age, we're always thinking about stuff coming from Asia.
Right.
But we're having issues from Europe as well. It's the same thing. It really doesn't matter which direction it's coming from. The same issues are everywhere.
Yeah. The volume of import from Asia is greater, obviously, so the problem is going to be more pronounced. But yes, absolutely, it's not an Asian problem. It's not an American problem. It's a global problem.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, then global problems need global solutions. But they're slow in coming. There's just not much we can do about it.
Nope.
Well, gee, on that happy note.
It's got to be patient.
Bartender.
It'll work its way out.
All right. Well, I think that's a great place to end it there. So, Bob, Shane, thank you so much for taking the time to have the conversation and giving us a peek behind the curtain as to what you're dealing with on your side of the business.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Drew.
If you need help with instruments, repairs, sheet music, or anything band or orchestra, reach out to us at boomermusiccompany.com. And if you like what you hear, do me a favor and tell a friend. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook, and subscribe to our e-newsletter so you will never miss another video or podcast. This is Drew with Boomer Music Company. Thank you for listening.